Hi, I'm Chris Warner with Cook Inlet Aquaculture Association, and we're going to be going through the external and internal anatomy of the sockeye salmon. This is a male sockeye salmon. You can tell that it's a post-spawn male because of its noticeable projection on the nose. This is called a kype, and the significant projection over the dorsal side of the fish, the top, as well as its very distinct color change. The head is turned green, the body is red, when these are normally silver when they're ocean run. So we'll talk a little bit about anatomical planes, which we use to explain where things are located on a fish or any other animal. The front of the fish is the anterior, the back of the fish is the posterior, the top of the fish is the dorsal side, the bottom of the fish is the ventral side. Working front to back, you can see the fish's nostril, the fish's eye, a couple of parts of the external gills. We have the preoperculum, the operculum. These make up the gill plate, and inside you can observe the gills. Moving towards the back, you'll notice that the fish has very different anatomy than we do. We have limbs and the fish have arms, being an aquatic species. They have two sets of paired fins, the pectoral and the pelvic, and several single fins, the anal, the dorsal, and the caudal fin, as well as what we would call a vestigial structure, the adipose fin. At one point in time in this fish's evolutionary history, this had a purpose, but it does no longer. This is important in salmon aquaculture because some hatcheries clip these to identify these fish as hatchery-run fish. This one's not clipped, but it's one of ours. So now we'll talk about the internal anatomy of the salmon. First thing we'll discuss are the internal structures of the gills. We've removed a couple for a close-up later. The gills are comprised of two main components: the filaments, which are the primary site of gas exchange. So as a fish breathes, they get rid of carbon dioxide, just like we do, and pick up oxygen out of the water. They'll swallow water through their mouths and push it out through the gills. These are called the gill rakers. They're less important in salmon than they are on other fish. Certain species of fish use this as a primary way of actually collecting food, where they'll filter small organisms out of the water. The gill cover, which we've removed and discussed prior, the preoperculum and the operculum, serve two purposes. They protect the gills from the outside, and they also serve as a cover, so when the fish actually inhales water, it's a seal, and they'll close their mouth and force that water past the gill plate and over the gills. Okay. And here we can see a close-up of the filaments and the rakers. So now we'll go through a bit of the internal anatomy. First, we'll talk about the circulatory system. The heart is one of the primary organs. It moves blood throughout the body. The spleen helps assist cleaning blood as it passes through the body and production of new blood cells. And the kidney also filters blood and functions as a way to remove waste. The digestive system, food passes in through the mouth, goes through a tube called the esophagus and into the stomach. This structure here functions similar to people's intestines and helps absorb food. It's called the pyloric ceca. The food then passes through the intestine and out the anal vent. The sexual organs of this fish, considering it's a male, are right here. These are the testes. So here we have a female spawn-ready sockeye salmon, and they look much similar to the males. There's not quite as much of a change in morphology. They still experience the same color change when they're ready to spawn, but you'll notice that she doesn't have the kype, and there's no significant dorsal projection where they get that very noticeable hump. As far as anatomical differences, the only real difference between a male and female salmon are the sex organs. Here we have removed one of the ovaries. She's not quite ready to spawn yet because you can see that these eggs are actually still bound to the skein itself. If she was actually ready to spawn, they would just be free-flowing and loose. As far as internal anatomy goes, we've got a pretty good shot of the swim bladder here. It did rupture during dissection, but this is what the fish uses to maintain buoyancy. And here we can see her kidneys, and we've removed a couple of the organs for a nice close-up. We've got the spleen, the pyloric ceca, the liver, and the heart. Alrighty. So here we actually have the ovary of the salmon. And you can see the external skein is the actual sac these eggs will develop in inside of the female's body. And if we turn it over, it's been opened up. And you can see all of these ribs and projections that the eggs actually attach to and develop in. So here we'll look at the inside of the fish's skull. Just like us, the fish's central nervous system is controlled by the brain. Here we can see the back of the eyes. And what we'll do next is actually pull out part of the fish's hearing system, which is the ear bone, or the otolith. And we'll talk a bit about why that's important to hatchery work.
Yep.
Let's see if we can get this into focus. So this is the ear bone, or the otolith. So here we'll talk a bit more about the otolith, or the ear bone of the fish. These are really important to hatchery work because you can actually tell how old a fish is by looking at the rings on these bones under a microscope, very similar to the rings on a tree. And we can actually control what these rings look like with either temperature or chemicals, and basically give our fish a barcode that can be seen when these fish are caught. And these barcodes are used to both identify this fish in terms of which hatchery it came from and which stock it belongs to.